Hi all, good morning and welcome to this webinar on answering frequently asked questions about eSign and eStamp, specifically designed for legal teams. I'm your host, Aditya, Head of Marketing at Leegality. Before joining Leegality, I was a litigator here in Bangalore for about 3 years. So I've had to lead electronic evidence, produce electronic evidence, rely on eSign documents in my practice before Leegality as well. I'm joined by Amla, our General Counsel here at Leegality. Before joining Leegality, Amla was on the legal team at ICICI Prudential. Amla, thanks for joining today. It's very hard to get you for one of these. Glad we could finally make it happen.
Happy to be here.
So before we begin, just the customary plug out of the way. We at Leegality run products that help you digitize key regulatory processes. We currently have two categories of products. One is document infrastructure, which is everything you need to digitally execute and digitally manage documents in a paperless way. So that is our document execution platform. There's our document contracting platform. There's SignStation, which is our invoice signing platform. And for BFSIP folks out there, we also have our EBG platform. We've also recently launched Consentin, which is our end-to-end DPDP and privacy compliance platform. So that's who we are. And that's why we're doing this webinar on eSign and eStamp. Our core product deals with both eSign and eStamp very deeply. Cool. With that out of the way, this is how the webinar will be structured. Based on conversations we've had over the past few years with hundreds, if not more, lawyers and in-house counsel, we have collated the top 8 to 10 questions that we receive regularly about eSign and eStamp. We'll spend about 25 minutes diving deep into these answers. Then Amla will show us how she, as a general counsel at Leegality, uses eSign and eStamp in her daily workflow. And then we'll throw open the floor for an open AMA for about 20 minutes. Before that, if any question pops up while we're speaking, do ask in the Q&A box. We will try and take some up during the session itself, if not after the session. By the end of this webinar, you will receive a step-by-step framework to evaluate e-signatures for various use cases. Two, a legal checklist for implementation of eStamp in your flows. Three, which we'll send with the recording, written answers to AMA questions that we take up. And four, a way to eSign, and we'll show you a way to eSign and eStamp documents without needing to pay an annual license fee. In section 1, let's cover questions on eSign validity.
Aditya, I think there is some complaint regarding an echo that the participants can hear.
Sure. That's fine. It'll resolve itself.
Okay.
Before that, just a quick poll for the audience. Just curious as to how you're doing signing right now. Just gives us a good idea of the audience mix. So decent mix. A lot of you already using IT eSigns. A lot of you using physical eSigns, physical signs rather, not physical eSigns. No one using ClickWrap. That's good to see. So let's move on to the questions. Most of you using IT eSigns. That's good. In this webinar, we'll give you a framework on how to look at them, how to enforce them, how you can improve their enforceability and things like that. Cool. So on screen right now, if we can move on to the next slide. Yeah. On screen right now are 3 common questions we receive about eSign validity, right? One is eSign legally valid under Indian law, and are there categories of agreements that still mandatorily require a wet signature? 2, does the type of eSign matter? Aadhaar, OTP, DSC, virtual, click to sign, and when does the method actually change the legal outcome? And 3, can eSign be used for internal corporate documents like board resolutions, circular resolutions, so on and so forth, right? All of these questions, all 3 of these questions can essentially be boiled down to one overarching question. Can I use X eSign type for Y document, right? It's essentially that question. Can I use this type of eSign for this type of document? In the next few minutes, I'll give you a framework on how to answer this question on your own for any use case that comes before you. First thing to remember is that eSign validity is a simple binary yes or no question, right? There is no concept of more valid, less valid. An eSign type is either valid or invalid. There is absolutely no in between or any nuance, right? Legal teams often get stuck finding nuance to this question. Is this more valid? Is this less valid? There is zero nuance to this question. Don't go searching for any. So to understand validity, we need to first understand the provisions of the IT Act that give rise to the use of e-sign and electronic methods in the first place. The first is Section 5 of the IT Act, which essentially states that if a document requires a signature as the mode of execution under any law or regulation, then if you want to do it digitally, you can only do so with an IT Act e-sign. Second, so basically, like some laws and regulations say that, okay, they use the word signature, that this document needs to be signed. You can only use an IT Act e-sign if you want to do it digitally. Hold this thought for 2 minutes. We'll revisit it again. The next is Section 10A of the IT Act. The wording here is a bit convoluted, but Section 10A essentially means that where a document does not have a specified execution method prescribed, which is most contracts, you can use any electronic execution method or any electronic authentication method, right? There is no prescription to use IT Act e-signs mandatorily. The construct this provision uses is very similar to global legislations like the US UETA, which uses a similar construction to give validity to e-signs over there, right? So that's Section 10A. Again, hold this as well for 2 minutes. We'll revisit it. So essentially, with these two provisions in the Indian system, you basically have two tiers of electronic execution. One is IT Act e-signs, which gain validity from Section 5. And then there is everything else, right, which gains validity from Section 10A. IT Act e-signs are very specific and defined by Section 3, Section 3A, and Schedule 2 of the IT Act. There is a very finite and specific list, which essentially consists of four types of e-signs: Aadhaar e-sign, DSC token signing, doc signer, and PAN e-sign. For some other entities, there are a few other types of e-signs based on KYC sanctioned by the CCA. But basically, it has to be sanctioned and provided for by the CCA to be an IT Act e-sign. The next is other electronic authentication, which is really any non-IT Act e-sign method for electronic authentication. Can be an exchange of emails, can be an exchange of WhatsApp messages, can be an OTP-based virtual sign, can be absolutely anything, right? Then, of course, hold this thought again for 2 minutes. Blowing all of this up is Schedule 1 of the IT Act, which mentions specific types of documents for which e-signs would not be valid. Before we move to the next slide, just a quick, I think most of you are aware of this, but documents related to the conveyance or contracts related to the conveyance of immovable property for the last 4 years does not come under Schedule 1. You can actually e-sign it now. I know most of you are aware of this. A few people are still not aware of it. So thought we'd specifically highlight that. So yeah, now like how do we square all this, right? Section 5, Section 10A, IT Act e-signs, non-IT Act e-signs. It's a very simple matrix of validity, which we put on screen here for ease of reference, right? So how do you use this? So if like business comes to you with a document saying, I want to use this type of signature method for this document. First, identify which of the three categories on the left your document falls under, right? First step is simple. Simply see if the document falls under Schedule 1 of the IT Act, because if it does, you can't use either. If it's not in Schedule 1, see if any law or regulation requires the document to be signed. If it does, then you can only use an IT Act e-sign. If it's neither, then you can use both, right? So the choice ultimately is yours. With this, of course, with this matrix of validity, we are able to answer all three questions we asked at the beginning. One, is eSign legally valid under Indian law? And are there categories of agreements that still mandatorily require a wet signature? The answer is very simple. Yes, eSign is legally valid under Indian law. And only documents listed under Schedule 1 of the IT Act still need a wet signature. Two, does the type of eSign matter? Aadhaar eSign, DSC, so on and so forth. And when does the method change the legal outcome? As far as validity is concerned, if a document requires a signature under law, then you can only use IT Act eSigns for digital execution. If a document does not mandatorily require signature, then you can use any electronic method. Third one, can eSign be used for internal corporate documents and things like that? Yes, you can use eSign for internal corporate documents. Just be mindful that if the Companies Act or any legislation specifically says that this internal document must be signed, then you can only digitally execute that with an IT Act eSign. So that's the matrix of validity. Wanted to now bring in Amla to explain a few practical use cases for each layer, because we've discussed this in theory that, okay, if a law requires a sign, use IT Act sign, but doesn't require a sign, use anything. So Amla, why don't you take us through some practical use cases of these line items?
Thanks, Aditya, for covering the legal validity part so well and leaving the practical use case part for me. This is the fun part of the webinar, I think. So, what do the different layers of validity really mean? For documents which are required to be explicitly signed or digitally signed under any law, you have to use IT Act electronic signatures, that is Aadhaar eSign, DSE, PAN-based eSign, or DocSign. Now, such explicit call out for digital signatures are found in a few legislations and regulations, especially financial sector regulations such as directions by RBI, the IRDAI, and SEBI directions or regulations. If you look at secretarial standards under the Companies Act for MCA filings and board meeting related documentation, there is a specific mandate to use DSEs or digital signatures as defined under the IT Act. Many of these regulations also refer to the IT Act digital signature definitions within the regulations or directions. So for such documents, you must definitely use DSE, Aadhaar, or DocSigner. The mandate is very clear. Practically, therefore, loan agreements or insurance policies, copyright assignment agreements, PMS, AIF onboarding agreements, when digitally done, these documents need to be signed using Aadhaar, which is scalable, DSE, or DocSigner. For signing board meetings and resolutions, MCA filings, DSEs need to be used, which are already anyway issued to directors of companies, right? And where the law explicitly calls out a signature or digital signature requirement, obviously we've covered that we have to use Aadhaar or DSE. But what about the other documents? In many of the routine documents that are signed on a day-to-day basis, signing is required only to communicate acceptance of a contract. There may not be a specific law or regulation requiring a signature. In these cases, you can opt for a non-IT Act e-sign like a virtual signature or email exchange or click wrap consent when you want to do it digitally. Additionally, operational difficulties might make IT Act electronic signatures such as DSE and Aadhaar an overkill in routine agreements. We get it. In these cases, you can opt for convenient e-sign methods which are perfectly valid for these scenarios and will help you digitize your processes. So routine agreements like employment agreements, offer letters, if you're doing campus hiring and need to get a bunch of employee onboarding documents signed, you can use an OTP based e-sign. General agreements that your legal team signs on a day-to-day basis, such as master service agreements, partnership agreements, or vendor agreements, NDAs, you can use an OTP based e-sign like virtual sign. For leave and license agreements which don't need registration, here also you can use a virtual sign. So if you're still physically signing these, it might to you seem like an unbroken process working just fine. So why change, right? But I'll tell you that there are real benefits to digitizing these processes. And that is why you should use virtual signs. It cuts down on waiting times, physical paperwork and transportation costs are cut down, paper storage costs are cut down, and it helps in record keeping in a way that actually helps you find the documents when you need it. I have digressed a bit to the ease and convenience of digitizing your processes. So let's get back to validity of the types of e-signs. Validity, therefore, is a simple yes or no question. The answer depends on whether the law mandates a signature for the document. If there is a legislative mandate to sign or digitally sign, like RBI directions, go for IT Act electronic signatures like Aadhaar or DSE. If there is no mandate, go for virtual sign, OTP based e-signs, exchange of emails. And the main thing, there are only very few limited documents that you cannot sign digitally due to legal validity reasons. And those are the ones listed in Schedule 1 of the Information Technology Act. Otherwise, all documents can be e-signed. If there's any paperwork signing requirement which is making your life difficult or creating a bottleneck or delays in your organization, just think about the validity framework that we just covered and try to digitize it. While validity is a yes or no question and very permissive in Indian law, enforceability is another thing that you need to consider, and Aditya will cover that next.
Thanks for that, Amla. Just one request to folks, please ask your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat. It's quite hard to keep track in chat. If you've asked it in chat already, that's fine. We'll address those. But for subsequent questions, please ask in the Q&A box. Anyway, thanks, Amla. Good practical understanding. I also know in a bit you're going to show one workflow, one eSign workflow that you use very regularly. So excited to see that in about 10 minutes. Now let's come to our second section, because a lot of the questions we've received in the chat box actually pertain to this, right? Questions around eSign, ease of enforcement. Here are two of the most common questions we receive. One is, for high value or specially regulated instruments like investor agreements, property deals, large value contracts, is standard eSign sufficient? Or does the law require DSC or physical execution? Two, does the type of eSign matter? And when does our method change the legal outcome? This is again the same question we dealt with in the last section, but there is some enforceability angle to this as well that we'll cover now. Essentially, these two questions, can be boiled down to one overarching question. Can a particular method of eSign or electronic execution be easy to enforce? Can I practically get it through a court of law? Can I practically use it to enforce the contract, right? Here, it's not a question of validity, but literally the practical enforcement implications of using any particular eSign type, right? And so unlike validity, which we discussed in the previous section, is a binary thing, enforceability or ease of enforcement is actually a spectrum, right? You can have some things which are easier to enforce and some things which are harder to enforce. There is actually nuance here. So in this section, we'll tell you how you can actually fill up this spectrum, right? How do you mark eSigns as per how easy they are to enforce? For that, let's take a step back and understand what a signature actually does, right? A signature or any execution process essentially performs three core functions. One is authentication, that the identity of the party signing the document is clear. Two is integrity, that the document so signed is final and cannot be altered. Third is non-repudiation, which is that the parties cannot then later deny that they accepted the document or signed the contract, right? So when you want to evaluate any particular eSign type or authentication type, evaluate it on the touchstone of these three criteria. I'm going to take three eSign types or three electronic or three signing types rather. And I'm going to judge it on the basis of this criteria, right? So let's take the most common type of sign, which is the wet ink signature. Not common for the audience because most of you have moved away from wet ink signs. This slide will validate your decision, right? We sometimes take for granted that wet ink signature, it's physical sign, it's the most secure, it's the most inviolable, it's safe, tried, tested, secure, right? But when you actually measure it against the three critical criteria, you actually find that it falls quite short, right? Because in terms of authentication, it's possible to forge a signature. Even worse, someone's actual genuine signature is often not the same whenever this if they sign it like say 2 months later, which leads to random issues on is this the correct sign or not. Two, in terms of integrity, it is not guaranteed that just because something has been signed, it cannot be altered. Pages from a contract can be torn out. Someone could make subsequent alterations to a contract. There's a whole dispute on was there alteration made before signing, after signing. And three, finally, on non-repudiation, there are whole provisions of the Evidence Act, or now the BSA, designed to try and contest and prove the validity of a signature, right? Handwriting experts and things like that. All of this and all of the doubt created in terms of authentication and integrity can delay enforcement a lot, right? So net, it's not that you cannot enforce a vetting signature, they're enforced daily. It's that there are enough vulnerabilities in the process of a vetting signature that make it relatively much harder to enforce than some electronic types, right? Especially when you're faced with a party in court determined to thwart you or a party in court that wants to delay proceedings. But on the other hand, there's another end of the spectrum on digital, which might not necessarily be better, right? Many companies use click wraps. No one on this call, so this slide will validate all of you, which is an I accept or I agree button. These perform even worse than physical signatures, right? Because in terms of authentication, it's impossible to prove who actually clicked the I accept button. In terms of integrity, the I accept button really does nothing to secure the actual document. And in terms of non-repudiation, it's very easy for a party to dispute that, hey, I did not click this, or I did not know that I was clicking this button. On the other hand, let's take IT Act eSigns, which we discussed extensively in the first part of this webinar, right? They are incredibly popular, even in this audience pool. 60% of you mentioned that you use IT Act eSigns, right? So they've become incredibly popular over the last few years, especially in regulated industries or industries that deal with court proceedings, right? And this is primarily because they are the gold standard in document execution, right? Because in terms of authentication, there is a verifiable KYC completed when you're doing an e-sign or procuring an e-sign by an independent third party, which is a certifying authority, right? This plus an authentication that you do each time the signature is actually used means that there's virtually no doubt that you are the person doing it. Two, in terms of integrity, the e-sign and like an electronic signature as defined in India makes a document tamper evident, right? So if a document that is e-signed by an IT Act e-sign, let's say it's e-signed, someone later changes the document or alters the document, the e-sign breaks, and you are basically, when you open the document in a PDF reader, you are notified that, hey, this document has been altered, right? There's no other type of authentication which actually gives you this real-time info on the state of tampering of the document, right? And third, finally, in terms of non-repudiation, e-signs under the IT Act have presumptions of validity under the BSA, which is the new Evidence Act, right? Which make them by far the easiest to enforce in a court of law or proceedings. On this last point, I just wanted to zoom in a bit because many teams still do not appreciate how much the new Evidence Act and the old one also, these are provisions directly taken from the old Evidence Act, how much the BSA actually privileges IT Act e-signs, right? Because if you see Section 85, the BSA essentially presumes that if an agreement purports to include an e-sign, then it is presumed that it was concluded and executed by the parties who e-signed it, right? Essentially, it's a presumption of finality of the agreement, that the e-signs were used to create the binding document or contract as it is presented in front of you. Section 86(1) presumes that if a secure e-sign is affixed, and all e-signs, by the way, this word secure e-sign, all IT Act e-signs use the secure method, asymmetric cryptography, a certifying authority involved, they all use that method. So if you use a secure e-sign, then it is presumed that the document has not been altered since the time of the signature being affixed, right? So it creates a presumption in favor of the integrity of the document as well. And section 86(2)(a) goes actually a step further and says that if you use a secure e-sign, then it is presumed that the parties who e-signed actually did so with the intent of signing the document, right? This is a presumption of intent as well, that it's imputing on the parties who have affixed the e-sign, right? So this makes it very hard for parties to simply backtrack in a court proceeding saying that, hey, I did not e-sign this document. This presumption will work against them, right? These provisions genuinely under the old Evidence Act and the new Evidence Act are quite unprecedented. And I don't think there's any other type of execution method to which these privileges are accorded till date. I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong. So with that methodology I just told you, looking at the three e-sign types, it's very easy to fill up the spectrum of enforcement. This is our reading of where different common types fall on the spectrum. If you disagree with this, we've given you the methodology. We'll share this deck along with the recording by Monday. You can use the same methodology to fill up your own spectrum, right, for your internal compliance considerations. Cool. So till now, I've spoken about validity of eSign. I've spoken about the benefits of IT Act eSigns. So then a natural question is like, are you basically saying that, hey, just use IT Act eSigns, why use anything else? What's the point of these other electronic authentications if IT Act eSigns are so great, right? Should we just not opt for this all the time? To be honest, the answer is not a clear cut yes, right? Because the answer actually depends on real world factors, like how many of your signers will actually be able to do the e-sign, right? For example, not everyone may be able to do Aadhaar e-sign. Either Aadhaar linkage is very poor or they're say NRIs, right? Two, how big a priority is enforcement for you, right? IT Act e-signs are usually costlier than non-IT Act e-signs. So companies and teams often do that calculus that is my enforcement really highly probable that I'm willing to bear this extra cost. Three, in some cases, you may be using a non-IT Act eSign and add security features that satisfy your internal compliance reading that, hey, this is secure enough, I'll be able to prove it in court. And four, there are like operational real world considerations. So these questions, how to navigate them, we're going to run through two illustrations. Amla is going to run through two illustrations for this to show us how this actually works with two very practical examples. And after Amla runs through that, and before we come to the eStamp section of the webinar, I'll answer a few questions from the audience. But first, how do you actually practically decide between an IT Act eSign and a non-IT Act eSign? So Amla, over to you. I think the first illustration is of an HR team getting offer letter signed, which is what we do as well at Leegality.
Right. So we'll cover two seemingly similar use cases, but which actually differ because of the real world implications and importance of the underlying document which is being signed. Right. So HR team getting offer letters signed is a pretty common use for virtual sign or a simple OTP based authentication signing. The factors important here are physically signing offer letters is no longer convenient in a world of virtual interviews and hiring, not to mention the delays that physical signing causes and the costs involved. This is a routine process, the first step in your employee onboarding, and in many organizations, this is done at scale. You want to keep the process friction free. All candidates may not have Aadhaar. If they do have Aadhaar, they might not have their mobile number linked to Aadhaar for OTP authentication. And with respect to enforceability, this would be a low stakes document, not something that you would go to courts to enforce. And importantly, there is no law or regulation requiring an electronic signature for offer letters. It's a simple contract under the Contract Act where communication of an offer and acceptance by the candidate is enough. Here, using a virtual sign, which involves an OTP-based authentication sent to their email or phone number, is sufficient and helps you streamline and digitize the process quick and easy. The second example is of an HR team getting NDAs signed by key management personnel joining the company. Now, what would change in this scenario for the legal team? In this case, the critical nature of the underlying document changes. This is a non-disclosure agreement for a key management personnel or senior leadership. In such critical roles, poaching by competitors, confidentiality leaks, these are prevalent and critical. And these NDAs often become the important document that needs to be submitted, established, and proven in case of a dispute in court. For such documents, which are critical to enforce, prone to court disputes, and generally more high stakes to the business, even though there is no requirement in law to sign an NDA electronically, it's just a contract which requires communication of acceptance between parties. Right? So here it is advisable to use an Aadhaar e-sign to take benefit of the presumptions under the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam or the Evidence Act. Right here, you can use an Aadhaar e-sign or a DSE, which is an IT Act compliant electronic signature. You basically want to make the contract easy to establish in case of a dispute. The presumptions and difficult to deny audit trails here work in your favor to easily establish the contract in court. Now, in cases where your senior leadership does not have an Aadhaar or DSE, you can consider a virtual sign with additional features like an audit trail, which captures IP address, device details, probably adds security features like a live face capture. Basically, these data points in the audit trail cannot be refuted or denied easily in court if it comes to a dispute about the acceptance of the NDA. So depending on the criticality of the document, you can opt for a more easy to enforce signature or opt for additional features to make a virtual signature difficult to repudiate.
We can actually answer some of the questions that were asked in the Q&A box, because one of the questions, for example, was employment contracts, appointment letters, can they be signed only digitally by DSC or can they be signed electronically via DocuSign, so on and so forth, right? So if you saw Amla's two examples, there's two questions here, right? One, validity wise, they can be signed by any method, right? And but you may still take a call that I'll use an Aadhaar eSign if it's like, say, an employment agreement for, say, a senior employee, because you want to enforce against trade secret leakage later, right? So the question, can they be signed only digitally? No, they can be signed through any method. Should you sign them only via IT Act eSign or via DocuSign? That is a call you will need to take, right? So that's one. The other question is, I think we had a question in chat, is DocuSign valid? This was initially in the webinar. I think the answer to that as well is matrix of validity, right? If the law does not require sign, then you can use a DocuSign even in India. If it does not, if a law requires sign, you can't use DocuSign in India if a law specifically requires sign. If a law does not require sign for the document, so it's a contract, you can use DocuSign. It is valid. Then the question actually becomes like, what do I do? Like, should I use it or not? Which is where our 4-step process comes in, right? Let's bring this whole section together into a clear, actionable takeaway for you, right? Because we've covered a lot of concepts, we've covered a lot of factors. So far, it's been quite heavy and dense. So I don't blame you if some things you missed out on. The ultimate practical thing you want to know is like, look, business is coming to me with a request to e-sign X document. How do I respond? So here's a 4-step framework that we're giving you. Sorry, Amla, I'm just going to keep asking you if the deck is visible, because for some reason it's not visible for me. It's visible, right? Okay, yes.
Yes.
Awesome. 4-step framework, right? You can switch off after this slide. Like, this is the practical takeaway we promised you at the beginning. So business comes to you, you need to evaluate a sign type, right? Let's say they say, hey, I want to use DocuSign. Perfect example. We've received that, hey, I want to use DocuSign for a particular type of document, right? How do you do it? Step one, simply assess the law, right? Is the document under Schedule 1? If so, simple answer, you can't use any electronic method. If not Schedule 1, is there any law or regulation in force that requires the document to have a signature specifically? If so, you can only use IT at eSigns, right? So you can't say use a DocuSign. So in step one, you screen out step one and step two, where you look at the matrix of validity based on your analysis of step one. Is it under Schedule 1? Is there a law or regulation? Then you put that sign type against the matrix of validity. That screens out immediately whether, like, it screens out a lot of cases, right? Immediately. Step two, or rather step three, is in most cases, 90% of cases, where the law doesn't require a sign and it's not under Schedule 1, right? That's when you look at step three, where you look at the spectrum of enforcement and say, okay, DocuSign, the specific DocuSign method that business team is proposing to use, how do I judge it on the 3 criteria that we mentioned, right? Authentication, integrity, and non-repudiation. And then map it on the spectrum of enforcement against the other options that business team is evaluating. And then finally, step 4, after you do these 3 steps, you kind of have a picture of, okay, is this sign valid for this use case? And how easy is it going to be to enforce for this use case? Once you have this clear legal picture, you come to step 4, where you add your own operational, business, and internal compliance filters to see if the document in question will be okay to be DocuSigned, given what you know about validity and ease of enforcement. For most documents, you will need to take this final call yourself. Let's stay on this slide. Let's stay on this slide because we've received a few questions where we can actually use this 4-step formula, right? One question was, one of the signatories is abroad, right? So they cannot do an Aadhaar e-sign or a PAN e-sign, right? Some signatories maybe are in India. So business comes to you and says that, look, I want to, or you legal as well. You're like, can I use a DocuSign for that foreign signatory? Now, if this document does not require a sign under law, right? You may still say that I ideally want them to do an Aadhaar e-sign, it's more enforceable. But since you have no other choice under step 4, when you put in that operational consideration that look, they're abroad, they're a foreigner, they don't have an Aadhaar eSign, yet I can use a DocuSign because it fits in the matrix of validity. It's not ideal under the spectrum of enforcement, but because of step 4, my operational consideration, they're abroad, I have no choice but to use it, right? So you may choose that then for that document to use a DocuSign for the foreign signatory, right? On the other hand, there are some documents where foreign director of a company without an Aadhaar, and that document specifically requires a signature. There, you may not be able to use a DocuSign, right? There, under step 2 itself, you will realize that, okay, DocuSign will be ruled out because the law actually requires a signature. There, unfortunately, until we have mutual recognitions of recognition of electronic signatures, which I think is in the works, but until we have that, you will actually have to get a physical signature for the foreign signatory, right? Because they can't do an Aadhaar eSign, they can't do a PAN eSign, they can't do an Indian DSC token eSign, right? Happy to be corrected on this. If anyone knows of any law which recognizes mutual recognition of certifying authority issued signatures across jurisdiction, please do let us know. Happy to update our knowledge. So essentially, that's this 4-step framework, right? We'll share it with you after the webinar. So we're almost done with the eSign section, and we've answered a few questions as well. Next, we receive a question on enforcement, and we have a quick poll again for that, which is if a dispute reaches court, how do you prove an eSign document, right? And what does the audit trail legally need to contain to be admissible as primary evidence? Again, quick poll before we move on and answer this question. Oh, few of you have had an eSign document challenge in court. Most of you haven't. Interesting. Cool. Most of you have not had an eSign document challenge in court, but if you do, how would you actually produce it in evidence, right? The answer is really simple. The first step is admissibility, admitting the document. For this, you need to rely on a Section 63 certificate, which we've shown on screen. If you recall, this is the erstwhile 65B. When 65B used to be in force, we used to get a lot of questions asking, can you give us a format of 65B? Tell me how to draft a 65B. The BSA has removed this ambiguity and has actually given a format, just use this format. One important thing to clarify is this 63 has to be produced by the party producing the document as evidence in court. It is not something that actually relates to the actual contents. It's a procedure to actually admit the document and then examine the contents, right? Like it seeks to validate the chain by which the document is just being placed before the court, right? Because many people ask us, like, will you, say, legality provide a Section 63 certificate? The answer is no, right? Because the Evidence Act actually does not want us to provide the 63 certificate. It places the onus of the 63 certificate on the party producing the evidence, right? And there's absolutely no ambiguity here if you read the Evidence Act, right? We will, of course, assist you in this process if you so need assistance. But there is no scope under law for the service provider to produce a 63 certificate, right? It's like asking Google for a 65B or a 63 certificate if you're producing their emails in court. So that's admission, 63. Next is like, how do you bolster the agreement once it's admitted, right? Court will actually look at the content, see if it's properly executed or not. Here, if you use an IT Act eSign, that should be sufficient with the presumption of validity. But for extra security, we at Leegality at least also provide an audit trail which is compliant under the Evidence Act, right? So it contains the IP address of the signer, timestamp of each step of the eSign by all parties, the eSign certificate details if an IT Act eSign is used, the name of the signer, and we received a question on this in the Q&A box. If you add additional security features like, say, a face capture or a GPS capture, which you can do, it reflects this in the audit trail as well. And finally, we also affix our own IT Act signature, Legality's own doc signer to this, kind of like a tech witness. This ensures that the audit trail itself, if you recall Section 86, the audit trail itself gets a presumption of integrity by virtue of our signature, right?
Right. Just wanted to add something very quickly here. The Section 63 certificate is not a complicated document. If you take a look at the format which is already in the Act, it requires very basic details. The only technical document required here is the hash value of the document, which would be a part of a good audit trail. You can quickly get your IT team to check the hash value of the document otherwise also. And you can see whether it matches the hash document hash value provided in your audit trail. If it matches, that means that your eSign document has not been tampered with and is good to be submitted in court. So all the other requirements in the Section 63 certificate are very basic. And I know that this comes up a lot and confuses a lot of lawyers, especially in-house lawyers in my experience. But it is the easiest thing and there is nothing to worry about. If you have an audit trail, all these details can be filled very easily. Right, that's it.
Thanks, Amla. So that answers our question. If a dispute, like if it reaches court, how does an e-sign document prove itself? Right? File a Section 63 certificate to get it admitted, and then have a secure audit trail that contains the following details, right? Look carefully at your audit trail and see if it does that. Now, final question before we move to the open AMA, which is eStamp. But before we proceed, I think one final poll, or have we done that poll already on stamping? Maybe we've done it. Anyway, we can move on. Let's come to eStamp, which is what's the most common question we receive on eStamp, right? We can move to the next slide, which is when does a document need to be eStamped, and in which agreements can be signed or e-signed without any stamp duty at all? The answer is very simple. There is no ambiguity here. If you are signing an agreement, it needs to be stamped. Simple as that. The Stamping Act, Indian Stamp Act, State Stamp Acts have a residuary clause saying if it's an agreement that is not mentioned in the schedule, this is the stamp duty. If the document is not an agreement, look through the schedule of the Stamp Act applicable to your jurisdiction. These are the only two things you need to consider. There are no other criteria that come into play when you're deciding stamping, right? That, oh, no, my document is this, like it's a low ticket document, or like, actually, I don't need to stamp it because like we both agreed we don't need to stamp it. None of those criteria matter. None of those considerations matter. They may give you comfort. Under the Stamp Act, these are the only two criteria that matter. If it's an agreement, it needs to be stamped. If it's not an agreement, look through the Stamping Act schedule to see if that document comes under and needs to be stamped. Almost all documents do come under the Stamping Act schedule. Follow-up question to this, which we just received in the Q&A box: is it mandatory to e-sign the stamp? No, it's not mandatory to e-sign the stamp, which is where our next section comes in, which is what are the ingredients of valid e-stamping? If we can go to the next slide. This is a quick legal checklist. What are the things you need, legal requirements you need to ensure your digital stamping is valid, right? So questions like, do I need to e-sign the stamp? Things like that will be answered here, right? One, you need legally compliant defacement. So if you're using a system where there's a physical stamp paper, so in most e-stamps, the e-stamp is generated online and then printed physically and then digitized again for use, as we'll show you shortly, right? Digitized again for use. Here, you need to ensure that the physical copy is defaced before the document is executed digitally. Two, the first party name should appear on both the physical and digital stamp paper. Three, there needs to be a clear indication that the stamp paper is used uniquely for a specific document. You do this via the legend that I think almost all of you affix on your stamp papers anyway. Four, the stamp papers must come from a government authorized stamp vendor. And like, rather than using things like stamp receipts or the thing that, look, I have paid, I have the stamp paper, I'm just not affixing it here. And finally, under the IT Act, the digital stamp must be identical to any physical copy that you have of the stamp paper. These are the 5 requirements for valid e-stamping. Any other requirement that's not, and this is obviously not needed if you want to do valid e-stamping. So we can move to the next slide. Which is, how does eStamp work in practice? Does stamp paper need to name specific parties? Which value should be used? And who bears the legal responsibility for paying stamp duty? The answer is simple. We can move on to the next slide. 4 questions, right? This can be broken down into. 1, how does eStamp work in practice? Fulfill the requirements you mentioned, the 5 requirements as per the stamping laws and the IT Act. 2, does stamp paper need to name specific parties? It mandatorily needs to be named, like the first party needs to be named. 3, what value should be used? For this, we do not provide advice. Please look at your relevant Stamping Act schedule. 4, who bears the legal responsibility for paying stamp duty? 1, your contract can specify this, but if your contract is silent on this, refer to the Stamp Act. It usually gives it. Honestly, the government is just concerned with like that stamp duty has been paid. Ultimately, you can arrange with your party like who pays it, right? There's no like Government just cares that it's paid. They don't care who's paid it. If we can move on to the next slide. Apart from that, digital stamping, of course, offers other compliance benefits. Compliance benefits, I'm saying, right? Like the operational benefits. Like, for example, if you use physical stamp paper, you can damage or lose stamp papers, which creates compliance risk. With a digital stamping, there is no damage. Two, with physical stamping, you rely on a manual effort or discretion to actually affix stamp paper. With the digital stamping, you can actually programmatically affix it automatically. Three, stamping operations just take time. With digital stamping, you don't have stamping operations. And four, of course, one increases business costs and digital stamping reduces business costs, right? So if business is looking at legal as a cost center, digital stamping is it's a clear win you can provide them to actually reduce business costs via a legal process change. So that's our webinar. This is a checklist that we've given you, legal compliance checklist for stamping. After this, we've like reproduced the other checklist. If we can move on to the next slide. The matrix of validity that you can use when particular eSign is put, spectrum of enforceability, which you can also refill up based on the criteria, and finally the 4-step eSign evaluation process, right? So a lot of your questions are, can I use this document for this use case? Use this 4-step eSign evaluation process. It will answer your question. With that, I want to take some questions. Since we're running a bit short of time, I want to take some questions first. And then Amla, maybe we can show how you use eSign and eStamp daily. There are a few questions that directly stem from our webinar. So let's quickly take them. One is, this is an interesting one. Let's say I generated an eStamp to attach to a document and then send this over for e-signing. Just wanted to know till what duration is the generated stamp valid for the document. Also, a subsequent question in the same question, is an e-stamp attached to a document that has been e-signed valid for lifetime? I think this is a very common confusion that we receive on validity of stamp paper. So Amla, do you want to quickly take that?
So validity of stamp paper, if it is not attached to an agreement, depends on which state are we talking about. Certain states, stamp acts have a defined validity of 6 months, like Karnataka, Maharashtra, right? But for other states, there is no such prescribed expiry period for a stamp paper. So it is valid till the time it is attached to one particular agreement. And the second part of the question, yes, once it is attached to an agreement, the purpose of that stamp paper is complete. Then you just need to store it, and you can store it for as long as you need to store the agreement for. It is perfectly valid whenever you want to submit it in court. The stamping compliance part of yours is already done when you use it to attach to a document.
Thanks, Amla. Another question, quick one. Do we need a DPN for e-sign documents? No, DPN is completely your call. There is no mandate to do a DPN. Few questions we received on what if signatories are outside India, do not have Aadhaar PAN, how can they e-sign documents? Again, if the document does not require a sign under law, they can use any method. If it does require a sign, unfortunately, for now, you're stuck with physical signs unless you can get them an Aadhaar somehow. One question, which is, can eSign be used for clients based outside India? Yes, eSign is not location specific. You can use it. The question is, can they do an eSign? Will they have an Indian DSC token? Will they have an Indian Aadhaar? If they do, they can do eSign. If they don't, then no, they cannot do an IT at eSign. Yes, this is a good question we've received. Isn't the stamp paper validity of 6 months only for purpose of getting refund for a new stamp paper? For usage with agreement, there is no expiry. Correct. There is no specific provision which clarifies this, but if you see this,
So for certain states, there is a specific expiry for the stamp paper also, like from 6 months from the date of issuance, you can't use the stamp paper post that. But for other states, that 6 month period is only with respect to refund for a new stamp paper. So the states that I mentioned, Maharashtra, Karnataka, they have a 6 month restriction on usage also after date of issuance.
thanks.
Again, what you need to check here is the respective state stamp act. These provisions are very clearly laid and the law is very clear here.
Thanks. Question, is eSign on physical stamp good to go? Yes, there is no relation between the two. I think some of these questions are also like, how does stamping work? What is the CA used by Leegality? Because Leegality does not feature on the list of CA. So how are we doing eSign? So I think now we can quickly move to a demo. So Amla will show a demo, a workflow of how she uses Leegality daily in her legal workflow. And through this, we can answer some of the questions of how exactly does Leegality provide Aadhaar eSign? How does digital stamping work? Does Leegality provide it? The short answer is yes. We'll show you exactly how we do it and a few other things. Better to show you
Right.
how it works.
So this is my Leegality dashboard. Once I log into the platform with my user credentials, this is what I see. And I'm going to take you through a very simple workflow that we use daily for non-disclosure agreements in the legal team here at Leegality. So I have configured my workflow and I have a very easy process to send a document for signature. So here I have something called a workflow that is configured. Most of the settings are already configured, but it's a very easy one-time configuration that you need to do. I run this workflow and here you can see that I already have my NDA template, which is already pre-configured here. I will put the document name. So if it's for a vendor that I'm evaluating, ABC Corporation, I'll name it. You can even put your internal reference number if you want to put. I've already configured stamps that we use. We use Delhi stamp paper for the documents that we are signing here at Leegality. So that's pre-configured. I'll show you how it looks. Here I get to preview the non-disclosure agreement template that I already have, and I have to fill in the details. Since this is a pre-configured workflow, I just need to fill in these details. I'm putting the date, the client name, with the requirement, and these things get filled here in the template. Client name is already put in, and my first signature is already configured, and here I just need to put in the second signatory. I'll put Aditya's name here and he'll show you. In my configurations, what I've done is the first signature is set to me here. So when I proceed, you can see my name is already configured here. My details are provided. And I also put in Aditya's details because he's the second signer. And signature type Aadhaar is put in here. Mine is pre-configured to a virtual signature. So you can see how both the processes for both these type of signatures look. Right. So here we come to the last stage before we send out the document. You can preview the document. This is how the stamp paper looks. And the points that Aditya was talking about, you can see here. So this is a
This is a demo stamp paper. Like it will, if you use Leegality for e-stamping, it will give you an actual stamp paper. For demo purposes, we obviously don't want to use a fabricated stamp paper. When you use stamping through Leegality, you will obviously get the actual stamp paper here. This is just to show you how the logic works.
Yeah, so there's a stamp serial number that comes and the legend that we put here to ensure that the stamp paper is defaced.
Yeah.
And you can
Print it physically on the stamp paper before we digitize it and make it available in your inventory. Just
yeah.
to be clear. So
And the stamp document ID. Yeah, go ahead.
that fulfills the requirement that we mentioned, if you remember the legal checklist, that the physical copy and the digital copy must be identical. Two, that the physical copy must be defaced before it is digitized, fulfills those two requirements. And the unique ID, which Amla is showing, fulfills the requirement that this is unique for the document.
Right. So yeah, you can scroll through the document. Once we've already configured the signing coordinate, so the signing coordinate is on the last page of the document here. Yeah, so here the signatures will come across.
Signing coordinates went up. Last page.
Yeah, sorry, I think I configured it wrong. The page changed somehow. But yeah, basically I can place it here. Since this was an already configured workflow, I won't, it's a longer process to change it now, but otherwise it comes in here and I send the invitation. Once I send the invitation, you can track the status of the document here on the dashboard. But the first signer is me. I'll go to my email and I'll wait for the email to come. Yeah, so I've got the invitation to e-sign the document. I got it in my email. I click on sign. It takes me to legality. I can, if I was a signer, if somebody else was configured as a signer, I'm already familiar with this document, but I can read through the document and review it. And then I click on proceed. I enter the OTP, which is sent to my email ID for authentication. Yeah, and I can draw my signature or I can select my signature. So I select here because I'm on my laptop. On my phone, I could just scribble the signature. And here by clicking, there's a consent that is taken here that I'm signing this document and I understand that my details will be used for signing this document. Sign the document. So the first signature in this flow is done. And then the document goes to Aditya. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Yeah.
I just shared my screen. Before that, just wanted to answer a quick question. Someone was asking, can coordinates that are there below, can we have multiple per document? No, we can stop sharing the deck, please. I'll reshare my screen for the demo. I've not received the link yet. You can enter as many coordinates as you want on the document. Ultimately, remember that the coordinates are just a visual aid. Actually, when you e-sign a document, there is you can basically it signs the whole document as an envelope. Amla, I think you'll have to just share the signing link with me because I think email notification wasn't added.
Um,
You can just share it with me on message. In the meantime, I'll answer a few questions. One question was, do we provide digital stamping? Yes, we do, as we've shown you. And what about CAs used by Leegality? So that we will cover now in the Aadhaar eSign demo. We've received some other questions as well. We won't be able to take all questions, but what we will do is by Monday, when we share the recording, we will send written answers to questions that to both questions that we've answered and questions that we've not answered as well.
I've
So
resent the notification. Aditya, you can check and also send you the link. You would have received it in your email.
yeah. Cool. So I've received the signing invite. Click on sign. Is it visible?
Yes.
So this is the document. If I see Amla's sign is reflecting here. Now, of course, this coordinate you can put wherever you want. Simply proceed. I choose Aadhaar OTP method. Obviously, these options won't be available. You can choose to disable these options because most people would not have, say, a biometric or an iris ability. This is there for assisted journeys. Right. So there was a multiple questions we received on how is Leegality actually doing eSign, right? This is how we do it, right? So we are an application service provider. We are not a listed CA, so you would have done research and said Leegality is not here. It's completely correct. We are not a CA under the IT Act. We are an application service provider under the CCA guidelines, right? Which is simply we provide an application layer for people to actually use eSign. We enter into partnerships with CAs like Protean, formerly NSDL, CDSL, Verasis, and we essentially provide the entire application experience. So email notifications, having the audit trail generated, having the stamp paper affixed on the document, having other security features. And when it comes to eSign, we redirect you within the same flow to the actual certifying authority for a fixture of the eSign, right? So here, this is the Protean page. They are a CA, right? You would have found it on the CA website. So if you see, the Aadhaar details are being entered on Protean, not on Leegality. So we are not collecting or generating the eSign. Send OTP. Let me wait for my OTP. Got it. Verify OTP. Once it's verified, the document has been signed successfully, right? And so that's the entire eSign process. If you see, the document has both eSigns now, including the Aadhaar eSign here. You can download an audit trail, which I'll share on my screen in just a second. You can download the signed document as well. And yeah, that's the eSign process along with the eStamp process. So the two questions, does Leegality provide stamping? Yes. And two, how do we do eSigns? Well, we partner with CAs for the actual eSign generation itself. So here's the audit trail. As mentioned, it contains every record of the signing, every event involved in the signing process, along with stamp details, along with document ID, along with the document hash value as well. Consent provided, we also digitally sign it with our electronic signature here to give this a presumption of integrity. And yeah, that's the Leegality audit trail. Can take a few questions now. Before that, if you can reshare the deck very quickly. So what Amla showed you, you can actually start using right away. One, we will also share a book we've written on this, Laws of eSign, which is India's only comprehensive resource on the legal and technical framework of electronic signatures. We will share this across with you, which is slightly old edition. So some of the Evidence Act provisions are the old Evidence Act, but none of them have actually been changed in the new Evidence Act. So we'll share that with the recording. A lot of the questions will be answered here. Two, we also now have a bot which answers legal queries that you may have. So you can go to Legalibot and actually ask legal questions to it. It will answer them, I think, with 95% success rate, I want to say. I want to say more, but I'm going to say 95% because that's what Amla has told me to say. So you can do that. We'll share this deck so you can go get these links there when we share the deck with you. Two, three, rather, if you want to start using Leegality, what Amla showed, you can do it right away, right? There is a license-free account where you can do e-stamping in one state, you can do Aadhaar eSign, and you can do our OTP-based non-Aadhaar virtual sign, right? Simply load credits, order stamp paper. Stamp paper will take a few days to come, of course, after you order it. But once it comes, you can use it for any agreement and just start using it, right? So you can scan and sign up here to use Leegality's free plan, which is no license fee, zero license fee through the year. See it, try it out. It will give you a feel of how eSign and eStamp works. And if you're a business that wants to then use additional security features and things like that, you can reach out to us for our business plans, right? But you can start using Leegality right away. And if you want weekly updates from Leegality, either relevant regulatory updates, latest product updates, case studies, scan this and you can sign up for our weekly WhatsApp or email opt-in facility. With that, we'll answer some questions. Some more questions. One, does Leegality provide an only e-stamping service? The answer is no. We only provide stamping that fits into our overall document execution workflow. You cannot do standalone stamping via Leegality. Is e-stamping available in Maharashtra? Yes, it's available in Maharashtra. Two, e-stamp paper validity for Pondicherry, Puducherry. Yes, we provide valid stamp paper in Puducherry as well. So that's two questions out of the way. Some questions in chat at the beginning. I promised I'll get to them. So I am getting to them now. Which is a clarification on e-stamping for DDPI. You have to do it. And you have to do e-sign for it as well. And yes, you can do it via Leegality through the method Amla showed. You can integrate that via an API, right? We have the Leegality API, so you can do that. Another question someone asked is, we are seeing that in many documents it says that this document does not require a signature as the document is electronically generated. What is the validity of such documents? Great question, right? So again, put it through the matrix of validity. See the document. Does a law require that document to be signed? If no, then yes, it doesn't have to be signed. But there are many documents we receive like this which actually do need to be signed, right? For example, credit card agreements need to be signed under RBI's credit card directions. Yet sometimes when you get a credit card, you see it saying that, hey, this is electronically generated, treat this as a sign, it's not signed. That is invalid, right? So again, it all depends on the document and the matrix of validity, whether that document requires a sign under law or not. If it doesn't require a sign, then yes, it's valid. If it does require a sign and it's not signed, then obviously it's invalid. Your question was specifically with regard to tax notices, where they typically don't sign. To be honest, with regard specifically to tax notices, I am not sure. But it
Actually, there are some judgments on this, and there are, I think the latest development here is that the government has, the department can issue notices without signature, but this position keeps changing, and this is something that courts are opining on, so you can just check the latest judgment on this.
Yeah. If you're considering challenging the department of the tax department on this
It
ground,
is frequently
that
challenged.
will tell you whether you should or not. But in case you do, and do let us know the results. Another question, great question. Two parties in different states. What do we do about e-stamping there? Very simple. This is what most legality users also do, where the final execution is being complete. So where the second party is signing is where you pay stamp duty, unless this contract involves some immovable property, right, which is situated in a state, in which case obviously that state stamp duty applies, right? So where there's no immovable property, let's say it's a loan agreement or something like that, just dispersal of cash, where the final party is signing, because that's where the document execution is complete, that's where stamp duty is usually paid by people who do stamping via legality. Another question, will the recording be available? Yes, we will share the recording by Monday. Another related question to DDPI, eKYC document of stockbroker, that has to be e-signed under law. Mandatory e-sign, and DDPIs need to mandatorily be e-stamped. Another question, which is just hello with no question. Hello back to you. Second, is non-Aadhaar based signature as well as Aadhaar based signature, is non-Aadhaar based signature as valid as Aadhaar based signatures and wet signatures? Now, I'm going to answer this question, short answer. But even if you forget it, when you get our recording and the deck, you will be able to answer this question yourself. Question is very document dependent. If a document requires a sign under law, non-Aadhaar based signatures, wet signatures, Aadhaar signatures are all equally valid. If a document, so I'm getting confused. Did I say document require? If a document requires a signature, you can only use an Aadhaar sign for digital signing. You can't use a non-Aadhaar based sign. If a document does not require a signature, then all types are equally valid, right? So it all depends on the document. Look at this matrix of validity, see what type of document it is, and then see the columns on the right to see what is valid, what is not valid. Most documents fall under the third row, where both are equally valid. Another question, is e-stamping available in Tamil Nadu? Yes, it's available in Tamil Nadu via legality. And Shubhash has in the chat shared a document where you can see where all e-stamping is available via legality. So just go through that. We'll answer any questions you have, and we'll share that with the email as well. Another question is how to do DDPI e-stamping if it's a physical DDPI form. You can't. You'll have to do physical stamping there. So do it. If you do it digitally, then you can do e-stamping. One question, what are the key data privacy and storage compliance requirements for eSign documents? So we as an application service provider have a whole checklist that we have to follow under the CCA framework. In the interest of time, I can't go through that entire checklist, but it's the usual stuff: multi-level encryption, just good data hygiene and InfoSec practices. We also deal with a lot of RBI regulated entities, so we come under the RBI outsourcing guidelines as well. So there's that framework as well. Essentially, it's maintaining top level security practices, right? Like we are ISO 27001 compliant, ISO 29001 compliant, multi-level encryption, the whole package, right? It's a big list. You can go to the CCA website, Controller of Certifying Authorities, to see this. And you can see both ESP guidelines or certifying authority guidelines, and you can see the application service provider guidelines for a detailed set of data privacy and storage compliance requirements. One thing for sure is we have to, as an application service provider, we are mandated to keep the transactional logs and the audit logs. We are mandated to retain that for 7 years minimum. Another question, can adhesive stamp be used for a digitally signed document? I assume you mean the revenue stamp. You can use it. Whether it will be valid or not depends on the stamp act. Like if your document requires a proper stamp paper, then adhesive stamp won't do. If a document does require only an adhesive stamp, then you can absolutely do it. And yes, for a digitally signed document, you can do it via Leegality. We also offer a digital revenue stamping system where these adhesive stamps will also be affixed digitally to your documents. Another question, can a POA be signed digitally? By default, no, except if the power of attorney is in favor of or to the benefit of a BFSI entity, essentially. Essentially, it says, like if we go back to Schedule 1, yep, yep. Power of attorney is not, like you cannot sign it with an eSign, except if it's a POA that empowers an entity regulated by RBI, NHB, SEBI, IRDAI, PFRDA. So if if the POA is in favor of an entity that's regulated by these regulators, then you can e-sign it. So for DDPI, for example, it's a POA. You can e-sign it, right? Because it's SEBI regulated entity. But any other POA, generally you cannot e-sign it. Cool, we're done, by the way. So you can drop off whenever you want, just answering questions. So happy to stay back and answer questions. So I'm just going through the questions. We are done. We will share the recording with you. We will share written answers with you. We'll share this deck with you by Monday, along with the full book on laws of eSign. So yeah, but if you have more questions, happy to stay back and answer these questions. But if you want to leave, please do leave. We will share the recording and answers with you as well. Hope you enjoyed this webinar. This was quite a great questions. We don't usually receive so many questions. I think this is what happens when a lot of lawyers, including the two hosts, are involved in a webinar. One other question you received, can Leegality provide high value stamps as well? Or does that need to be done through franking only? Stay tuned. We will have an update on this for you shortly. So the slight hint is that right now it's tough. Soon it may not be so tough. So just with that cryptic answer, like stay tuned. Cryptic or not so cryptic, stay tuned. We will update you on this very shortly. Another question, can we fetch eStamp paper through API on a case-to-case basis? Yes, you can. Like our API allows this. Like it will ensure that the correct stamp paper is affixed on the document, if that's your question. Now, whether you want to pick a specific stamp paper saying, I want to pick this stamp paper with this stamp serial number, no, that you can't do, but it will ensure the right denomination is affixed on the document. Another question is, what if you divert a click wrap to get Aadhaar eSign, right? Like, so you do a click wrap and then it diverts to an Aadhaar eSign, completely fine. But then why would you have the click wrap? I mean, you can do it. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. The point is, if you just use click wrap without any other type, it's going to be hard for you to enforce. Someone asked, can we add the Q&A about expiry of stamp? Yes, we will add this in the written document that we share with you by Monday, latest Tuesday. Another process for advanced procurement, order through the Leegality dashboard. Within 7 to 10 working days, it will be made available in your dashboard, stamp dashboard. And we will also send it to your physical address. When you order it, you have to give your physical address. Within 7 to 10 days, it will be made available in your dashboard. And within a few days after that, it will be delivered to your physical address. There's a form for ordering stamps in the dashboard. Just fill up that form. You can also reach out to us, like if you need any help with that, or you can ask Legally Bot So there's a bot. You can ask that bot. It will answer your questions. 95% of the time, I want to say more, but I'm only allowed to say 95% of the time, which is good enough for most of these questions, right? These basic, like these questions on how to use the product, it will answer it. So just go to this bot. You can ask it to guide you through the process. Another question is, can a click to sign document be enforced if an audit trail is there, or should we prefer Aadhaar eSign only? Up to you. With an audit trail, you have to show how is it clear that this person has clicked the document. Can you show that? That's what you'll have to prove. Can you show that the document has not been altered? Can you prove that? If you're confident of those answers, you can do it, right? The audit trail is not a magic bullet, right? The audit trail simply tells you what happened. But is what the audit trail telling you something that will convince the court? That is something you will need to dive deeper into your ClickWrap process to see. The question, should you prefer Aadhaar eSign only? Honestly, it depends, right? It really depends on the use case. So without that, we won't know. Because if your use case, like most signers can use an Aadhaar eSign, then sure, go for it. But if most of your signers can't do it, there are a lot of other options, right? In between options. Not a ClickWrap, not an Aadhaar eSign, like an OTP-based virtual sign like Amla showed, which actually has an audit trail, which also has a record of events of when each authentication happened. You can add things like face capture to it as well to improve security. So there's a lot between ClickWrap and Aadhaar eSign that you can also consider. Where do I get the costing for eSign done through Leegality on the pay-as-you-go model? You can do that on our website. So if you go to that QR code, if it's not on this website, actually, we will add it. But you can also go to our pricing page. It's there on our pricing page.
You can also log in and create an account, which is very easy, and check it at the billing section in the account. You can just fill your wallet and see it's there. Also, ask Leegality bot.
I'll tell you the answer right now. For Aadhaar eSign, it's 25 per signatory, not per sign. So if you have 1 signatory, but 100 times on the document is still one sign, right? The appearance of the sign is purely visual. So it's 25 per signatory for Aadhaar eSign and 15 per signatory for a non-Aadhaar eSign. That's the amount. Yeah, I think we've covered all. I think we may have missed 2 or 3 that were in chat. We will give written answers to those as well. I'm here for 2 more minutes. So if you want to re-up that question that I've missed, you can do that. Someone has re-upped it. No, it's just messages on how you can sign up for a pay-as-you-go plan. Cool. Thanks so much, Amla. Thank you so much for attending. We've taken more of your time than you committed. Actually, we have one hand raised, so I'm happy to take that. I'll unmute you. You can ask your question. Subhash, I've given you mic access. You had your hand raised for a while. My apologies. You can unmute and ask. Subhash, you can like unmute and ask your question. Otherwise, you can put your hand down if we've answered your question already. If you don't want to unmute, or you can ask in the Q&A box. Up to you. Cool. Cool. So maybe some mic issue. You can write to us. You can write to Amla or I. We're available on LinkedIn. You can reach out to us on our email IDs, which I'm dropping in chat. Or you can just reply to the email we send you with the recording on Monday or Tuesday. That's the easiest way. And of course, sorry, mentioning it again, plugging it again, Leegality bot. You can ask Leegality bot as well. It answers most questions. Cool. Thank you so much. And yes, thanks for all the questions. This was great. Amla, thank you so much for
Thank you.
being here, and we'll do this again soon.